Thanks for choosing this free Anfield Index podcast. If you'd prefer to listen to this or any of our other shows without adverts, then now's the time to check out Anfield Index Pro. With AI Pro, you can supercharge your entire listening experience. You'll not only get all of our podcasts without the ads, but you'll have them far faster with our quick publish feature available exclusively for subscribers. AI Pro also puts you in the heart of our sound studio, with an option to listen to many of our shows live and interact with the podcasters in real time as the shows are recording. Upgrading couldn't be easier. AI Pro is available on all popular podcast platforms, and we have our own apps for Apple and Android. Just head on over to AnfieldIndexPro.com and get started today.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Rival Recon here on Anfield Index Pro. And after the Reds' disappointing start to the season continued with another draw at Anfield on Monday, on this week's pod we look ahead to a game against an opponent the Reds beat 9-0 on aggregate last season, as we preview their trip to Old Trafford on Monday evening to take on a rattled-looking United side. Joining me on the pod this week to discuss the continuing dysfunction at the club and the dreadful start to the season by Erik ten Hag's side, we welcome on writer for the Busby Babe and SB Nation, Pauly Kwestel. Welcome, Pauly.
Hi, pleasure to be here.
Yeah, no, it's good to speak with you. Always, I think whenever this fixture comes round, we've had sort of a long line of guests come on the show to discuss or give us their view on the United perspective, and it always feels like there's a myriad of different things that we can talk about. And to be honest, over the past few years, certainly perhaps even longer than that, it's been quite a dysfunctional sort of scene to be digging into. No different this season, of course, as we'll get into in a second. But before we get into this season, I just wanted to ask you, because I spoke to Carl Anker a couple weeks ago for a preseason version of this Rival Recon pod that we do. And we're just asking him about his expectations prior to a ball being kicked at the start of the season. So I want to ask you just a couple of questions like that. First of all, what was your sort of opinion on the appointment of Erik ten Hag as the new United boss? What did you see as sort of the biggest obstacles he would have to tackle? And then thirdly, I guess after preseason finished, what were your sort of expectations for what United would do this season?
Yeah, I was happy with the Erik ten Hag appointment. He's very highly rated. He plays a good style of football. I don't watch a lot of Dutch football, so I didn't have an extreme opinion on him one way or the other. I spoke to people that do, and the prevailing theme around that was this is going to be a good hire, so I had no reason to doubt that. The other side of it was Mauricio Pochettino, whom I wanted the club to hire in 2019, and in 2022 I was unsure. I was always skeptical about how much different he would be, so I had no issues with the appointment of ten Hag, but I did have my one reservation was that I thought he was being it's possible that he's being a little overrated. He is coming from a smaller league and he's had success everywhere he's gone, and that's great. There is a difference between managing a team in Holland with, comparative to the rest of the league, the largest amount of resources, to now managing a team like Manchester United, one of the three biggest global teams in the world, where everything you do and everything you say is going to be scrutinized. And he's unproven at that. That doesn't mean he can't handle it or that he won't handle it. It just means we don't know. And that was something, just the small reservation there. What he's going to have to deal with is I never thought this would be an easy job, and I never thought any manager this season would be air quotes successful, because this is such a heavily unbalanced squad, and it has problems right in the heart of it. The midfield is the engine of your car, and if you don't have that proper engine, it doesn't matter what parts you've upgraded anything else on the car, the tires, the driver, the steering. If the engine doesn't work properly, none of the other things are going to work properly. And this is a club that has neglected midfield for years, and it didn't have a good one.
It's really interesting to hear you say that, actually, Pauly, because I think it's funny. I mean, obviously, sort of they're in very different situations at the moment, but it feels like that has been this transfer window's focus for Liverpool fans online as well. People talking about, is the engine up to scratch when it comes to Liverpool? Is the engine getting on a little bit? Things like that, and it must feel like a real privileged position to say that from a Liverpool fan's perspective, given what's happened over the past few seasons. When you contrast it with some of the struggles that United have had in midfield, certainly. But just that point that you mentioned a little bit earlier around, anybody would have come in and you would have said, it's difficult to achieve success, whatever that is. I mean, in your view, with all those, bits of context, like you're mentioning, the unbalanced squad, the dysfunction. I mean, what before a ball was kicked, what would you have actually qualified as a successful season for Erik ten Hag?
That's the most difficult question you could ask. I think at this point, the most minimum standard, if you ask a United fan, the most minimum standard for success is a top 4 place and a trophy. And that's not a standard that Manchester United fans want to live with. We're old enough to remember that not too long ago, finishing third and simply winning the FA Cup would not have been considered the best of seasons. But times have changed, and we want to get back there. And in order to get back there, you have to, build your way up. I don't even think this team can get to that level. The trophies are much more difficult to win now. Manchester City and last year Liverpool had a great run and were able to break it up, but City have dominated the domestic cups because they have such incredible squad depth that, like, people say, oh, you can make a run in the League Cup, you're good enough to do that. And it's like, City dominate the League Cup and City dominates the FA Cup, and Liverpool winning the FA Cup last year is a pretty big deal. And because City have such dominance, that winning a trophy this year is your best shot is probably the Europa League. And in the league, I think Chelsea are going to drop off from last season. I think Tottenham are going to be good. Arsenal are, if Gabriel Jesus takes them to the next level, they're going to be a force. I don't see United being much better, if that, than they were last year. I think they're the 6th best team in the league. I think if they get their affairs in order, they are considerably better than West Ham and don't need to worry about dropping too far below 6th. But there's still massive weaknesses in the squad that the bottom can come out and they can drop. So a successful season, I would say, certainly at this point now that we're 2 games in, it would be finishing in the European places. Or maybe you can make the argument to say that a successful season might actually be to finish 8th and sit right outside Europe, and next year have a full year of only having to focus on domestic football, more time on the training ground, less matches after a year that's going to be crazy because of the schedule and the World Cup and the last 2 years in general, that maybe having a year where you just play a little bit less football will actually be beneficial. So perhaps that's the successful season. But the fact that I'm throwing out so many different scenarios here, each one justifying a little bit less success more than the next, just shows what a mess this all is.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're talking about Erik ten Hag, obviously having achieved success in the Eredivisie and managing Ajax and having a pretty well established way of playing, a good reputation. But as you mentioned, I think it is one of these leagues that people still look at and think, well, you don't always get the top hit rate when you transfer from the Eredivisie to the Premier League, whether you're a player, whether you're sort of coaches. That there's been very few that I can think of just off top of my head that have achieved real top success, sort of going through that path. But it's even more so than the challenge of competing in that league. You have to deal with all the unique issues that come along with managing a club that's as big as Man United, and also a club that's going through as public a sort of existential crisis as United seems to have been over the past however many years now. But before we get into this season again, I just wanted to probably sort of a last point on what you were thinking ahead of this campaign is, you talked there about Erik ten Hag coming in. You're feeling positive around the appointment. A little bit of apprehension about how he'd adapt to the task, some of the obstacles that are facing him. But at the end of last season, when you looked at that squad, I mean, you've already mentioned the engine room of midfield, but where were the areas when you looked at that squad and go, okay, we this is where the money needs to be put. These are the areas that need to be prioritized. So what were the areas of the squad that you thought surely they're going to actually address those this window?
I thought that they would surely address midfield. This team last season, they had 4 midfielders. In that, if you were going to play 4-2-3-1, that's how I consider a midfielder, is someone that would play in that 2, not so much someone that plays in the 3, like Bruno Fernandes is an attacking midfielder, not so much a midfielder. They had 4. They had Nemanja Matic, they had Paul Pogba, they had Scott McTominay, and they had Fred. And they lost 2 of them. And at the start of last season, everybody said, we have these 4 guys and it's not good enough. We need to get better. We need more coverage. We need more depth. It needs to be better. They did nothing. So now you've lost 2. You needed to replace 2 just to get back to where you were. And from where you were was not good enough. And I would think that they would address that matter. And they sort of did, in that they signed Christian Eriksen, who is 31 and has a major elephant in the room, in that he had a massive heart failure on the pitch just 14 months ago, and we don't know how he'll hold up over a full season. That's all they've done. And Christian Eriksen is an attacking midfielder. He's been that his whole career. He has played deeper at times, but not a lot. I wouldn't classify him there. And even if you put him there, he's not replacing what Paul Pogba did. And
as we saw, right, against Brentford, I mean, he's played there as he's had an interesting start to his United career, where he's played as a false 9 and as a 6, getting pressed and harried across the pitch by Brentford. So, I think you're right to highlight him there. I mean, even as a Liverpool fan looking in from the outside in, I was like, surely midfield is going to be the issue that they address first. It's everyone's been talking about it, whether you're a pundit, a rival fan, United fans themselves. So, I mean, obviously we're talking on a day where it looks to be pretty certain now that one of the greatest sort of in that number 6 role, in that defensive midfield role, of certainly the last sort of generation is going to be moving to United in Casemiro from Real Madrid. Of course, this is Casemiro, towards the end of his career, and it's a slightly different thing that perhaps to contend with, and yet to be seen how he'll adapt to the Premier League and to this sort of specific system that he'll be played in. But for me, I was still stunned that we're only only a couple of weeks away from the end of the window, and it's taken this long for the midfield signing to be secured, and it almost feels like it's happened in response to these first 2 games. I mean, before we get into the games again, I mean, are you satisfied with Casemiro?
No.
Okay.
Casemiro, great player, one of the best, as you said. He's 30 years old, and we have enough data now to look at and see that when players are 30, they very rarely continue to perform at the same level that they were the previous years. Their legs start to go, they start to drop off. And 50 million pounds of a transfer fee, very high wages, that's a lot to pay for someone who, more likely than not, in 2 years is not going to be the Casemiro that you think you're signing. And then it becomes we need a new defensive midfielder, except we're paying a lot of money to Casemiro. This is a club that has financial issues. It wouldn't be beyond ownership to be like, we could sign a new midfielder if you sell Casemiro, except nobody's going to be coming for Casemiro. The well-run clubs just don't sign players like this. There's a few issues here in that. One is he's not the same profile as any of the other midfielders we've been looking at. Two is this deal happened in about 5 minutes. And as you said, it's happened almost 3 weeks into the season, because he hasn't been one of our top targets. At this point, it just feels like everybody has said no, that United are like, who might say yes? Casemiro. Let's call Real Madrid and see if he wants to come. And it's more his availability rather than is he a fit for this team. And this deal happened in about 5 minutes because Real Madrid haven't been able to believe their luck that someone has called and offering them money for Casemiro, who they've already gone out and signed his replacement, because they were phasing him out anyway. And because they are like, we just won La Liga. We won the Champions League. If we want to stay at this level, we need to slowly transition the old guard out and bring in a new generation of players. They're ready to move on from him. The fact that someone now is offering them a lot of money, they're ecstatic. And what United never seem to do is ask themselves this question when they're signing a player: is what does that player do at his current club? What is that club asking him to do that makes him so good? And what are we going to be asking him to do? Are we going to be asking him to do the same thing? Will we put him in that position for success? Casemiro is the defensive aspect. He's the legs and the energy of that Real Madrid midfield. He plays next to two midfielders who are not very good. They are among the best in the world. Toni Kroos and Luka Modric, there's very few midfielders that are even on the same level as them. Barcelona don't have players like that. Liverpool don't have midfielders like that. Manchester City, maybe, but they have different types of midfielders, but there's almost nobody on the level of Luka Modric and Toni Kroos who could sit there and just ping passes all over the field the way that they can, which makes Casemiro's job easy. It's just win the ball back, get it to them, let them do their thing. You're not playing with anybody like that at Manchester United. And you wouldn't play with anybody like that at any other club. So is he going to be able to be as successful there as at United as he was at Real Madrid? And if he's not successful, well, then that's a lot of money that you now have tied up in this player who you very quickly from here on out need to replace. It screams of desperation. Does it make us better right now? Yes, it does. And it's an upgrade over what we had for sure. I'm not sure how much better it makes us. I don't know how much it raises our ceiling. It's just, like I said, it reeks of desperation, and it's not the kind of move that a club who has a plan or has their affairs in order would make.
Yeah, I think that's the main thing to me, isn't it, really? That I think Casemiro, you can make arguments for him coming and potentially adapting well, combining him with players alongside him who, obviously not the quality of Modric, obviously not the quality of Toni Kroos, but can complement him, can help him settle a bit easier. And he obviously at his best, he's incredible at sort of having those interceptions at vital moments. Some of the screening work that he does, he's very, very effective. I mean, he keeps Fabinho and has kept Fabinho out of the Brazil side for a long while now. And it's just remarkable how that midfield at Real Madrid has sort of managed to conquer others that you would just see on paper. Surely they're going to be dominating them. But yeah, I think you're right. He's been moved on at a time where Camavinga is there, Tchouaméni is there. Perhaps the energy was starting to fade a little bit. That's why they had to bring in the likes of the Uruguayan player Valverde, of course, at Real Madrid, who provides a little bit more energy in that midfield than Casemiro is able to give any longer. So it's to me, which is another example um, not even of desperation. I mean, obviously, sort of the figures involved here apply a degree, or suggest a degree of desperation, but it's more. I'm just staggered as a fan looking from a Liverpool fan, obviously looking from the outside in, that Erik Ten Hag was appointed last season at the end of last season. They've known who has been coming. They've known his resume. They've known the style of football he likes to play. They've had all of preseason, and as you mentioned yourself, the area where everyone knows is the key area of that team that needs to be upgraded really before you can build anything else. Obviously, maybe a goalkeeper as well, as we'll come on to talk about. But to not address that until 2 weeks till before the window ends, and then to get in a midfielder who's quite clearly a short-term option, surely it just speaks volumes for the lack of confidence that maybe Ten Hag has in the transfer setup at United. And it's again, it's another name. It's not a piece of glorious scouting where you've plucked someone from obscurity. You've signed an Yves Bissouma like Brighton did before anyone else discovered him, or N'Golo Kante or someone like that. It's this is a very well known player. I mean, did you think? I mean, perhaps I'm sounding like I'm being patronising here, but did you think when there was the announcement of a director of football and John Murtagh, and some sort of suggestions that there was more infrastructure being put in place, that are you at all surprised by how sort of there seems to be a lack of planning for this window? I mean, how can that be the case when you've appointed the manager months ago, and you know exactly what he'd be after? Surely.
I really wish I could say yes. It just Murtagh came in and Fletcher and everything, but these were all internal hires. That it was like in May that they said that there were longtime scouts that were leaving. There was turnover, and it was very slow and everything. But Ole Gunnar Solskjaer came in 3 years ago and said, we need to change the way we do things. So you would think that somewhere the infrastructure was being built. And this summer, it's very clear that there just is none. And no clearer than the fact that, like I said, Casemiro is just a completely different profile than everybody else that they've been linked with. So it's taken this long because they've been hung up on Frankie de Jong, who made it pretty clear at the beginning of this window he didn't want to leave Barcelona. And Erik Ten Hag made it pretty clear, Frankie de Jong is my guy. I don't want anybody else. And that's where the infrastructure is completely lacking, in that they didn't have alternatives. You have to find the balance between getting what the manager wants and not having the manager be in total control. Because then, the team that we put out at Brentford had players signed by like 5 different managers. And that's what happens when you just let managers sign whoever they want. Most transfers don't work. It doesn't, it becomes a mess. When Erik Ten Hag wants Frankie de Jong, you have to look at it and say, okay, what is it that Frankie de Jong wants? Like that Frankie de Jong does that you want? Like, what profile are you looking for? And then have a scouting department that can go and come up with alternatives to that profile. Look, I'm talking to Liverpool fans. We all know the story that Jurgen Klopp wanted Julian Brandt, and the club went to him and said, not going to happen. Here's what you're trying to do. Here's this guy, Mohamed Salah. He can do what you're looking for. He's the guy that we can sign. And I'm sure if you went on Twitter at the time, people were sitting there going, Mohamed Salah, like the guy who failed at Chelsea, why are we signing this guy? And it's like, no, you trust in you put your trust in Michael Edwards because he clearly knew what he was doing. And United just don't have that at all. They have no alternatives to say, oh, hey, we can't get Frankie de Jong. Here's a list of players we can get. Or what kind of profile are we looking for any of the other positions that Erik Ten Hag wants? And it just, the fact that that Marco Arnautovic was like a serious consideration a week ago for no reason other than like Erik ten Hag worked with him 10 years ago and he's available now. Like that can't be something that happens. You need to have a department in place that can be like, that works with the manager and says, give me the profiles that we're looking for. You can give me your top targets. We'll try to make that happen. But if not, we're going to present you a list of 5 players that are similar. Like, I forget what his name is, but the left back that Liverpool signed last year, who from nowhere.
Tsimikas,
yeah. Who the heck is that? But Jurgen Klopp went and said, we need a backup left back. You know, everybody on Twitter could have been like, hey, that's a good young left back. That's a good young left back. But Liverpool went to him and said, this is the left back that's most similar to Andy Robertson. So when Andy Robertson's not in, this guy will come in and the entire team will play exactly the same because he is the most capable of doing what Robertson does. And look at that. He's the success. I'm like, where did he come from? The middle of nowhere. Like, that's what United need to build, because until they do that, it's literally going to be go through a Rolodex, keep calling people up until you find, oh, Casemiro, you're available? Fine, we'll pay you.
And the point that you made as well, I mean, sort of in the absence of that structure, sometimes what you see, and it can sometimes work as well, especially when new managers come in, is, you know, they go with what they know. You know, there's a style they're looking to play, and they know certain players from maybe their own, you know, the league they just come from, and they think, well, I know that these players can satisfy the style that I want to try and implement, right? So you talk about the likes of Malacia, who's come in as a left back from Feyenoord, obviously just 22 years old, and probably one of the more talked about signings, obviously Lisandro Martinez, 24 years old, who's a centre back coming in from Ajax. You know, Erik ten Hag played with him, coached him at Ajax, known for his technical ability on the ball. Certainly, lots and lots and lots made about his height, and we'll come on to talk about that. I think it's a little bit reductive when you're doing that, but again, you do have to sort of review, you know, the suitability to the league. But just before we move on a little bit, but you were talking about the sort of the positions that made the most sense to tackle. We've done midfield, I think. One that seemed really obvious, actually, I mean, perhaps it's only been after, especially obvious after the past 2 games this season. But I think most United fans were aware of it last season as well. If you want to play in a system where you're going to have a high line and you're going to need someone to sweep from the goalkeeper position, that David De Gea, even though he's been player of the season many, many times for United and has performed miracles for United over the seasons, is not that player, right? And were you surprised that, you know, Henderson was allowed to go for the goalkeeper position, and then also seemingly nobody else has been targeted to come in and, you know, give competition who actually would suit that style? I mean, was that another position that you were looking at this summer and thinking, yeah, we could do with looking at goalkeeper?
Yeah, it's baffling, to be honest. It's been obvious for a few years now. United, the midfield is the problem, and then they have expensive problems at the front and the back. And all these problems is in 2022, football is literally a game where your team has to be a machine of 11 players working together, and any weak part of that machine is going to affect the entire machine and prevent, you know, other people from being able to do their jobs. Once I read the story about Dean Henderson and how he said I arranged for a loan before I even met Erik ten Hag, I wasn't surprised they would let him go.
Okay. I didn't see that.
I mean, he's mad, and he has every right to be mad. Look, Dean Henderson has not been the utmost professional. He's the source of a lot of dressing room leaks. He complained a lot 2 seasons ago when he was getting more opportunities than any number 2 goalkeeper in the league get. He was playing in the Champions League. He was getting opportunities in the Premier League. He was still complaining about playing time, and it was like, yeah, David De Gea is not playing well, and he's not playing catastrophically bad. And when you're getting opportunities, you're not playing so well that to make anybody be like, wow, we need to put this guy in place of De Gea. It is clear, though, that David De Gea does not fit modern football, especially the way that Erik ten Hag wants to play. So it is baffling that they haven't even gone after just like a cheap goalkeeper, that someone that you would think, oh, that's just a backup. Even if he fits the style of play better than De Gea, that's an upgrade right now. And you could, if you spent £5 million on a backup who you say, we're just going to let you play this year, and next year we're going to target a more long-term goalkeeper, that's fine. You don't need to get the David De Gea, Courtois, Alisson, Ederson level player right now. It really is astonishing, and it comes from his wages. He's making £375,000 a week, which comes from, it all goes back to the Alexis Sanchez deal, like this, and comes back to how much of a mess recruitment at this club is. That at one point they said, oh, let's sign Alexis Sanchez. Why? I don't know. What does Alexis Sanchez bring you that team needed? I don't know. They gave him a ton of money, and all the while, David De Gea was having a historically good season, where he was solely the reason that United finished second. And he went there afterwards and said, why is Alexis making the most money on the team? I'm the most responsible for our success and the fact that we finished second. And he wasn't wrong. And it was a good argument. And United were afraid of losing him because they played a different style of football under Mourinho, but also back then, football was slightly different. It's changed a lot in the last 4 years. De Gea was not as big of a liability back then. And they caved and they gave him this new contract, which has made him undroppable. You can't sit there and have a £375,000 a week player sitting on your bench every week. It'd be a bad situation. He's been at the club 11 years. He's a big presence in the dressing room. He's very respected. It's a difficult situation that the club just never really handled well. And right after they give him that contract, football does start moving in a direction where you need your goalkeeper to be more agile, to come off his line more. And post lockdown, it went, exponentially more in that direction. The line is not just a straight little thing. It's like a learning curve sort of thing where it just took off. Football is so different now than it was pre-COVID that he's become a huge liability. But Dean Henderson, I get it. It's baffling. Like, he was supposed to be the number one keeper last season going into the season, and then he got COVID. That's really unfortunate. De Gea came in at the start of the season and actually played really well, made a bunch of massive saves that made it impossible to drop him. And by the time things got really bad, it's a mystery to me why Ralph Rangnick never gave Dean Henderson a shot in the second half of the season when United weren't playing for anything. De Gea's form had already tailed off. It was like, why is this guy still in net? Let's see what Dean Henderson could do. He didn't. That pissed Henderson off, and it should have. And he was like, I'm getting my ass out of here, and I don't blame him for that. The whole situation is baffling, and the theme of everything here is this could only happen to a club that just doesn't have any of its affairs in order. And like, this is the perfect firestorm of everything happening to Manchester United, that they deserve all of it because they run the club like a zoo.
Yeah, no, I think it's. I mean, I'm not expecting you to have sort of finely tuned answers to some of these questions, because I think you're right. I mean, it's just, all of this is just evidence of a lack of infrastructure, a lack of genuine seriousness in terms of planning. I mean, transfers often are incredibly revealing, especially when you, like you're saying, you compare and contrast them to clubs sort of a similar size, budgets, who are operating in a completely different world. I mean, Could talk about, obviously Casemiro looks like he's going to be coming through the door now, but yeah, at one point a couple of weeks ago it was Adrien Rabiot, and there was news a couple of days ago that there was an £80 million bid rejected for Antony at Ajax, and then there's suggestions that maybe Christian Pulisic will come in on loan from Chelsea. It's completely scattergun, and seems to be indicative of no real plan at all. So that's really quite shocking, especially when you think about the fact that everybody seemed to know that there was this dysfunction, but that they knew what kind of manager was coming in. So yeah, I'm not going to dwell any longer on transfers. I'm going to get into the season. Not that it makes for happier reading, but 2 games in, 2 losses so far. That opening game sort of being. I think it's fair to say in both games really, United have been outplayed and out coached really by sides who are, even if they're inferior in terms of the quality that they have across the pitch, are complete, really, really good examples of sides that are well-run football clubs. In terms of Brighton, who, they know what they're doing. The coach is clearly a very well-coached team with Graham Potter there. They recruit for the players. So they recruit for the style that they play. They'd even lost Bissouma, and they'd lost Ben White, the summer beforehand,
and
Cucurella, that's of course, yeah. So 2 key players are gone, and yet still they're able to go to Old Trafford and put in that performance. And then of course Brentford, talking small budgets here, but again, very analytical approach as to how they recruit, and they clearly knew exactly how United wanted to play and targeted it ruthlessly. So I just want to ask your opinion. I mean, what did you make of those opening 2 games? I mean, I imagine we'll spend more time talking about the Brentford game because it wasn't just the defeat, right? It was the manner of the defeat. It was the signs that mentally a lot of those players are quite fragile, and they, when put under pressure, they just really did struggle to respond to it, really. So I mean, not pleasant reading, of course, but what have you made of those opening 2 games?
I'm not going to say that I am not surprised by losing 4-0 to Brentford. That was a bit surprising, yeah. But I'm not surprised that they lost that match. Brentford played them off the park in the first half when they met last year, and they just didn't finish their chances. And then United managed to score a few goals in the second half and put them away. And then they came to Old Trafford in May, which was a match where Brentford had no desire to be playing. They had nothing to play for. They were safe from relegation. They were just going through the motions. And United won 3-0 in a match where United weren't particularly good. If Brentford had a plan, I wasn't going to be surprised if United struggled greatly because, like I've said, United are not a good team. They have massive holes. They have lots of great players, but in very important positions, they have big holes where if you don't have the right player there, it brings everybody else down. And that's where they are. Brighton, I was not surprised in the slightest about how that match played out. When Anthony Martial was hurt, you knew Cristiano Ronaldo wasn't going to come into the team. So it was going to be, how are they going to line up? How are they going to line up front? I might have done something different. The concern is, like you said, Erik ten Hag got outcoached in both matches. Both teams had tactics that were very ready for what Manchester United was going to do. And the big concern was United didn't make any changes. Like the second half of both matches were closer and better simply because Brighton and Brentford took their foot off the gas and just let United have the ball and say, here, you can have it. Go on for a little kickabout. We're not scared. You guys can't create any legitimate chances anyway. The only goal they've scored was an own goal off a corner. Erik ten Hag is supposed to be this tracksuit manager who, he's out on the training pitch with the players, doing the training with a very clear idea of what he wants to do. And he's got all these different tactical ideas. And one of the things that I did do when he was hired was someone sent me a few interviews that he had given while at Ajax, and I watched them where he talked about the tactics, and he talked about how you can't just have a way that you want to play. You have to be able to adapt to your opponent. And we haven't seen that at all. United, the last Dutch manager was Louis van Gaal. And aside from the boringness, one of the most frustrating things about Van Gaal was he sat there the entire match with that big notebook, and all he did was write things down. He never went to the tactical area or anything. He never yelled. And he was asked about this, and his philosophy is, he said, well, once the match starts, there's nothing that the manager can do anymore. It's up to the players. The only thing I can do is I can make 3 substitutions, and that's it. So me going up there and yelling isn't going to do anything. I don't really believe in that. I didn't like that. But it basically speaks to, like, we have our plan, and if the plan isn't working, well, we have our plan. And with Ten Hag, it's the old complaint under Solskjaer was there's no patterns of play, there's no build-up patterns, etc. 4 minutes into the Brighton match, it was very clear how Ten Hag instructed them to take goal kicks. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to put 2 center backs wide of De Gea. The midfield, the fullbacks are going to push up high. Our midfielder is going to drop, and he's going to come to the ball. And within a few minutes, Brighton had figured that out. They caused the turnover against Fred, and it just kept happening all game, and United were struggling because there was no, what else can we do? They did the same thing every time. And Brentford knew that coming in, and they just sat on those tactics. And even Ten Hag, spoke about how he was surprised that Brighton just went long rather than building from the back as they usually do. And Brighton were just, when their goalkeeper had the ball, they were just hoofing long balls. You have to adapt to that. And he didn't. He never changed how they were taking goal kicks. It just didn't seem like he could adapt to any of the tactical ideas that were being thrown at his side. And that's concerning. Aside from the fact that, like, he is trying to, I appreciate him trying to implement his style. And I understand that by doing that, we are going to drop points. We are going to lose matches to teams that we should not be losing to. It's a long process. But you also have players that are very much not even close to capable of playing this style. And there's been no adaptation or anything. It's only 2 games. So who knows? Maybe he gives them 2 more games. And by October, we're looking back and being like, wow, that player hasn't played since August. And we're now seeing an academy player. And part of the issue is that there's just no senior players that he can drop. There are certain positions where you can't drop anybody because there's no other player that can come into the side. So it's only 2 games, so you can't make definitive statements on he's not doing anything, but it's been concerning.
No, absolutely. I think, when it appears as though opposition teams are so well drilled, so well prepared for the way in which you're going to try and play, and I thought the Brentford game in particular, yes, you're playing some players. It's like square pegs and round holes. Certainly Christian Eriksen in the number 6 was a great example of that, right? And you've got a goalkeeper who not comfortable playing out of the back as well, defenders who aren't capable or comfortable playing in a high line, as we've seen plenty of times with Maguire when he's dragged out wide in those 1v1 situations. It's obviously an uncomfortable thing for him. He's more used to playing in a sort of deep defensive line. And again, perhaps that's the reason why some of these players looked so much better under Solskjaer, where they could play in that deep shape and then look to counter. This is not the way in which Ten Hag will want to play. And already you're sort of seeing people say, should he compromise a little bit? Should he be aware? Look, he's not got the players to play that style. But I do look at it from a Liverpool perspective and think it's just it's so insulting for a manager to come in with a very clear style of play and him not be given the tools to play the way in which he wants to play. He's supposed to be in charge of a rebuild, so I understand his frustration here as well. But I've seen he's been calling for togetherness ahead of the the next game. I think there's also set to be an anti-Glazer protest ahead of the next game as well at Old Trafford. Just before we get onto the game, actually, just realised that we've gotten almost 40 minutes into the pod, beyond 40 minutes now, and we've not spoken or mentioned the name Cristiano Ronaldo, which is pretty remarkable in terms of he obviously is another issue that we're not really discussing here, where clearly a want-away player wants to get out of the club, seemingly stylistically doesn't suit the way in which you want to play as well, yet doesn't have to appear to have many takers. I'm guessing he's got some sizable wage demands on his list of demands in general. I mean, just quickly, I mean, what's your view on the Ronaldo situation? Not long in the window now, if he was to go to try and get a replacement in, but in order for this rebuild to work, I mean, does he have to be moved on, really?
It's going to be very difficult to make it work if he's still here, because there's always going to be that Ronaldo shadow, and there's already reports of him pushing back against Erik ten Hag and not liking the pressing, and
he can't do
being
it,
upset.
That's the thing.
It's not that he can't do it; it's that he doesn't do it.
Yeah.
He doesn't put. Ronaldo's one of the most in shape, physical human beings on the planet. He could, if he wanted to exert his energy in a press, he could. He doesn't see that as where he should be spending his energy. He has this belief of, my job is to score goals, and he devotes all of his energy to doing that. Like, if you'll notice, he will never shy away from running and closing down a goalkeeper, because if a goalkeeper makes an error, it's just a tap in. But if his job in the press is, the ball went out wide, I need to go and close down that fullback. Well, if the fullback makes an error, like, now I have the ball all the way out wide. It's not an easy goal. It's not worth the effort for him. It's now I'm tired and I'm out wide. I need to rely on my teammates to make runs into the box. I'm not in a goal scoring area. You need a selfless player to be able to do that. That's one of the reasons that Roberto Firmino has been so successful at Liverpool, is because he is this selfless player that will do the work for his teammates. So there's already pushback from Ronaldo, which makes it difficult in the dressing room when you see key players not buying in to the coach, which we didn't have in the preseason. He wasn't there. And all the players were willing to, with a microphone and a camera in their face, speak about how much they were enjoying working with the new manager. And now we're getting reports of Ronaldo isn't happy. And then if you'll notice, the writing will say, like, Cristiano Ronaldo has pushed back about he's not happy with the pressing and the running and training. And then it'll say some players aren't convinced by Ten Hag's tactics. And it's like, is it some players, or are you just saying some players to make it seem like it's more than just Ronaldo? And that's going to, and it'll create engagement for you, because, again, the players were willing to put their faces on camera 3 weeks ago and speak about how much they enjoyed the manager and his new ideas, and how it was so important that they were all buying in. If Ronaldo stays for a year, it's almost like this year's a wash, and that next year becomes year number one, when he leaves, unless they stupidly renew his contract, because it does have an option for another year, and never put that past Manchester United, especially because Joe Glazer loves his commercial value. If he leaves next year, then next year becomes year number one for Erik ten Hag. But are fans going to look at it like it's year number one? Is the media going to look at it like it's year number one? Is the club going to look at it like it's year number one? So when you go through all these growing pains that you should be going through in year number one of a rebuild and a coach implementing new ideas, is everybody going to be mad and start applying the pressure that you should be under in year number two? Because they'll be like, well, this is his second season. That it's just, if Ronaldo sticks around the entire season, and he will, because there's nobody that wants him. Even Sporting Lisbon, their coach was like, I don't want him. So like even a team where Ronaldo, which he says he's not even willing to go to because they can't pay his wages, but even teams at that level are saying, no, we don't want you. He's going to be here. It's going to make it very, very difficult for Erik ten Hag to have long-term success.
Yeah. And I'm sorry that it doesn't get any easier in this conversation, Pauly, but I'm going to finally move on to probably the last thing we're going to talk about, but just briefly ahead of wrapping up. But it's, after two difficult performances like that, I mean, you're then welcoming a team that last season beat United 9-0 on aggregate. I'm not saying Liverpool are at their high-flying best at the moment. I think they've started the season in a disappointing fashion as well. I mean, they've drawn their opening games, and there's been some signs that there are issues still to be worked out, players missing as well, for example. But I mean, in terms of a game to have after those two performances, after the Brentford defeat as well. I asked you, I think, before we started recording, I mean, how you viewed it. I mean, I'm seeing some United fans looking at it and going, well, they need to show some fight. This is an opportunity. We're at Old Trafford against Liverpool. If we can't get ourselves up for this, what can we do? What can we expect of these players? And on the other side, people saying, look, we can't really open up in a game like this because we risk, being punished, being pressed like we were against Brentford by a side who can do it to a higher level as well. So I'm interested to sort of hear which side you come down on. And I mean, based on everything you just said to me, I mean, how do you think Erik ten Hag goes about approaching this game? Knowing the risks that are involved.
That's a really good question because he has been stubborn so far, and this is the way I want to play. And it's a question of how pragmatic are you going to be? Are you going to sit there and say, you know what, our best opportunity in this game is to do basically what United did 2 and 3 seasons ago. Stay very organized, stay compact, try to hit Liverpool on the counter. You just said it when you said, go out there and show some fight. And it's like, what does that mean? Because like Hannibal Mejbri came on at Anfield last season.
Yeah,
and
he just kicked a bunch
United
of people.
fans. Yeah, and United fans loved him. They were like, "Oh, this is great." Oh, he at least showed like he cared. Whereas I think it was Andre Mariner was the referee who basically at the end, basically he committed the foul, and Andre Mariner was kind of like, "I'm going to give you a break here, kid, but you should be sent off for this because you've done already 2 or 3 fouls, and that last one, I'm gonna give you a yellow. But if this wasn't like your debut, essentially, you'd be gone." And what did Mejbri? What was the first thing he did? Was he gave the ball away and Liverpool scored a goal. And okay, but then he went and kicked a bunch of people. Is that what showing some fight is? Because that just sounds like United will foul a bunch of players and lose the match. But hey, at least they stuck one in on them. So yeah, I think they have to stay compact. I think Anthony Martial should be back, which if Ten Hag goes with Martial over Ronaldo, that will give them a better defensive structure. There's United fans love to hate on Martial and call him lazy. He happens to be very, very good at keeping defensive structure. When you ask him to put in a shift and do the defensive work, especially when you know you're going to be playing on, when he knows he's going to be playing on the counter, and that's 80% of my time today is going to be spent defending and playing without the ball. He happens to be very good at that. Do they have the other pieces in the other positions to make that happen? I'm not sure. But mostly, here's my concern. I'm going to ask you 2 questions. Is Diogo Jota fit?
He's not, no.
Okay. What about Roberto Firmino?
He's fully fit.
So there's my concern, is that Liverpool have been struggling this season. Poor start. They are also adapting to Darwin Núñez, who is a completely different striker than Firmino. and when they use Jota as the striker. Completely different. There's going to be growing pains into that as Luis Diaz and Mohamed Salah and Trent Alexander-Arnold and everybody adjust to, well, we're playing a little bit of a different style. Well, Darwin is not playing in this match. He is suspended, which means, in all likelihood, Bobby Firmino comes back into the team. And that means it's, hey, this is what we're used to. This is what we know. This is what we did when we were really good. And maybe that's not going to work over the course of a full season anymore, which is why we got Darwin Nunez. But for one game early in the season, we can absolutely do this. And yeah, Luis Diaz is slightly different than Sadio Mane is, but you're about to go back to like the thing that Liverpool did when they were really good. That Liverpool struggling right now doesn't really make me any more optimistic about this match because of what I just said. That it just seems like it's going to be a long night at Old Trafford that really leaves it's probably going to seem like if Liverpool don't score more than whatever amount they score, it'll be because they decided not to score more.
Yeah, no, it certainly seemed that way last season on both games, the Anfield game and the game at Old Trafford. There just seemed to be a point where, yeah, the team begins to rest, right? Because I think it certainly became apparent last season. I think that those Liverpool sides who showed up just realised that United actually weren't capable of laying a glove on them. So yeah, just control the game. Just play possession football. Don't exert yourselves too much. Don't risk injury. And that's obviously a terrible place to get to for a game like this, a rivalry like this. So yeah, I'm very, very intrigued to see. I mean, it's a very difficult situation. I would not want to be in Erik ten Hag's position approaching a game like this, thinking about how am I going to deal with it. It's a difficult one. And actually, the run-in, just looking at the run-in, it doesn't necessarily get that much easier. I mean, yes, Southampton had their own struggles, but the one thing you know about a Ralph Hasenhüttl side is they're going to press, they're going to try and press, and they can do that effectively at times. Then you've got Leicester, perhaps there's an option there, not too keen on them. Then you've got Arsenal, then Crystal Palace, then Leeds and City. It's a tough opening run for United. So it's
Look, there's 20 teams in the Premier League, and 19 of them can beat Manchester United right now. There's not a single team that if we were playing them at any time, I'd be like, oh, there's no chance they lose this match.
No, yeah, it's obviously a very difficult. It's been a difficult start. So I mean, I don't tend to get that tribal on this pod, to be honest. But I'm obviously hoping for a Liverpool win on Monday. But I'm more sort of like perversely fascinated by how Erik ten Hag is going to approach this, because it really does seem like he has not been given the tools to succeed at the moment. So maybe it's going to be incredibly busy last 10 days or so of this window with certain names coming through that perhaps haven't even been linked yet in the papers. So it's going to be an interesting one for sure. But Pauly, I'm going to wrap up there anyway. Thank you so much for all the insight that you've given us there. I think it's clear from your passion as well that this is a painful period. It's been a painful period, especially when you can see problems that appear obvious and they're not being tackled. So yeah, I appreciate you putting yourself through that again to go through in detail what's been going on at United.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's my pleasure to come on. And yeah, it's painful, but like at this point, you have to, for your own sanity, is almost separate yourself from this. If you're not crying, or if you don't laugh at the whole situation right now, you'll cry and you'll drive yourself insane. And that's where I'm at right now. It's as a fan, it's disappointing because like I've been able to strip some emotion out of it in that, so the lows don't get me down, but the highs aren't as enjoyable either. And it's just so different from where I was 2 seasons ago, where when we lost a match, I was so down after that Europa League final, the 4-2 match against Liverpool, losing that, even though we were in second place and had this Europa League final to look forward to. That killed me. That was the highs of that season were so high, the lows were so crushing. And now we're just at this point here where it's like all you could do is sit back and laugh.
Yeah, and that's not a nice position to be in. Obviously, I mean, when you're heading into a game like United Liverpool at home, the last thing you want to have to do is think, well, I'm gonna have to remove my emotion from this game because I can't expect too much. So it's a mess at the moment, and I'm intrigued to see sort of how things unfold and how a talented manager looks to try and deal with some what seem like insurmountable problems. But to all those who've been listening on this third episode of the season of Rival Recon, underwhelming start to the Premier League season for Liverpool. Obviously, 2 draws, iffy performances, some questions around the midfield composition. Obviously, Darwin Núñez reminding us all that at times Uruguayan players can sometimes sort of skirt over the lines in terms of the rules with that headbutt in the last game. But we'll be back again, hopefully talking about a more positive result on Monday, and looking ahead to the upcoming game against Bournemouth. Surely it's going to be a sort of a slightly easier one to talk about, perhaps. But Scott Parker's arrival as Bournemouth manager, I'm sure there'll be a pretty stubborn tactical plan in there. So join us again for that episode ahead of the Bournemouth game. But between now and then, do check out all the other great content on Anfield Index Pro. And until then, let's hope for a positive result on Monday.
We hope you enjoyed listening to this Anfield Index show. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel so future podcasts find their way to your device automatically. There's nothing quite like fan engagement, and we'd love to know what you think of anything discussed on this show. The best way to get in touch is over on our free Discord community, where both podcasters and listeners debate the hottest LFC topics 24/7. Sign up free now at AnfieldIndex.com/Discord. You won't regret it. You can also follow us on Twitter at Anfield Index and find us on Facebook by searching for Anfield Index. Oh, and before you go, we'd love it if you could leave us a 5-star review on your favourite podcast app. It only takes a couple of seconds, and it means the world to the people who create these free shows.